In this video, we're going to be revisiting the partial quotients method, and this wording here is directly from this Everyday Math Student Reference book. In the partial quotients method, it takes several steps to find the quotient. At each step, you find a partial answer called the partial quotient. These partial answers are then added to find the quotient. In this video, we are going to do a couple example problems, and then I'm going to give some practice problems that if you want to go over on a piece of notebook paper or scratch paper, and you can work it along with me, or work the problem and pause the video and then check the answer later. But we're going to start our examples, and here is our first problem that we're going to start with. 731 divided by 6. And with our partial quotients, if you remember from the other video, we start the line. On this side of the line is where we're going to do our subtracting. On this side of the line is where we're going to put our partial quotients. And a new thing for this one is this chart right over here. And on some problems, you might be okay without the chart. On other problems, you might like to have the chart with you. And so this is just a way to help you find some partial quotients, and you can refer back to it as you're working. So on this chart, every single number is going to be multiplied by 6. 5 times 6 is 30, 10 times 6 is 60, 20 times 6 is 120, 50 times 6 is 300, 100 times 6 is 600, and 1,000 times 6 is 6,000. Now in this problem, we're not going to need that one because 6,000 is too big. It's bigger than our dividend. We're going to look for a product that's close to our dividend to help us find a partial product. And you don't have to be just using these. You can get even closer, but we're going to start with this one right here. So there are at least 100 groups of 6 in 731. So I'm going to put my partial quotient 100 to the right of the line. Then 100 times 6 is already over here in our chart, 600. Then we subtract. I can come back over here to my chart. This one's going to be too big, but 120 is less than, but close to 131. So for this partial product, I'm going to use 20 because there's close to 20 groups of 6 in 131. 20 times 6 over here in our chart is 120. We subtract. And we're left with 11. As you can see, we have no more numbers on our, no more products on our chart that would work. So now we have to think, how many groups of 6 can we get from 11? And we can get one group of 6 from 11. So our partial product is 1. 1 times 6 is 6. We subtract, and we get 5. Once we end up with a number that is smaller than our divisor, then we stop dividing, and this is going to turn into our remainder. So we've got our partial products, we have a remainder. We're going to add all of those up. 100 plus 20 plus 1 is 121 with a remainder of 5. So our answer for 631 divided by 6 is 121, remainder 1. And it's time to move on to our next problem. And the next problem that we're going to do is a 2-digit divisor 4,250 divided by 13. Got my chart over here with a single digit divisor. I typically would just stick with this chart. But once we get to a double digit divisor, I'm going to add a number. I might want to add more, but I'm definitely going to add 2 to my chart. So 13, we'll have 13 in all of those spaces. 2 times 13 is 26. 13 times 5. If I can't think of that in my head, I'm going to, somewhere on my paper, I'm going to do the multiplication problem. 3 times 5 is 15. 1 times 5 is 5. So 13 times 5 is 65. 10 times 13. Whenever you multiply a number times 10, all you need to do is put a 0 at the end. So that would be 130. Now, 20 times 13. Now that if we have 2, then we can do 20, because 20 would just add a 0 to the end of this. So if 2 times 13 is 26, 20 times 13 would be 260. We've already done 5, so we can use that to help us with 50. If 5 times 13 is 65, 50 is 10 times bigger than 5. So our answer is going to be 10 times bigger than 65, which would be 650. When you're multiplying by 100, you just add 2 digits to the end. So 1,300. Multiplying by 1,000, you put 3 at the end, so it'd be 13,000. And we can use these numbers to help us figure out some other numbers later on if we need to. So as I'm looking, this definitely is not going to work. It's going to be too big. 100 times 13 is 1,300. Now that would work. I could use that for my partial product, but I'm thinking I can get closer. And I think I can get at least 2 more. So I've got 20 here. I'm going to squeeze in 200 on my chart. And it's the same thing. If 20 times 13 is 260, 200 times 13 is going to be 2,600. Now, I could probably go even higher than that, but I'm just going to go with 200 for my partial product. There's at least 200 groups of 13 in 4,250. 200 times 13 is 2,600. Then I subtract 0, 5, minus 6 is 6, 3 minus 2 is 1. So now I have 1,650. Come over to my chart. Right here, I can use 100 for my partial product. 100 times 13 is 1,300. I subtract. Then I come back over to my chart. 20 times 13 is 260. So I'm going to use 20 for my partial product. 20 times 13 is 260. And subtract. $90. I can use 5. 5 times 13 is 65. And I subtract. $25. Well, 26 is too big, so my last one that I can use is 1. 1 times 13 is 13. subtract, and I have 12. 12 is less than 13, so I'm done. So my remainder is 12. And then I can add up my partial quotients: 200, 300, 320, 325, 326, remainder 12. 326, remainder 12. One more example. And for this problem, I'm going to use 6,745 divided by 16. So I'm going to come to my chart. I'm going to add my 2. I know I'm going to be multiplying all of these by 16. 16 times 2 is 32. 5 times 16. Well, I can't think of that one in my head, so I'm going to go ahead and just write it out on the paper. 6 times 5 is 30. 1 times 5 is 5, plus 3 is 8. So 16 times 5 is 80. 10 times 16 is 160, adding the 0 at the end. I can come back, and for 20, I can come back and reference 2. So if 2 times 16 is 32, 20 times 16 is going to be 320. 50, I'm going to reference 5. I'm just going to add a 0 to the end of my 80 for 800. 100 is going to have two zeros at the end. 1,600 and 3 zeros, 16,000. Again, starting off, that's going to be too big, so we're not going to use that one. And draw my line to separate subtraction from partial products. Just like the last problem, I could use 100 as my partial product, but 1,600 is still, it's just too far away for what I like to do. I could use it, but I want to go bigger. So I'm going to add 200. For 200, I'm going to reference 20. I'm going to add a 0 to the end of this one. So 3,200. 3,200, it's only about half of this number. So what I'm going to think about on this one is I'm going to actually put these two together. I'm going to add those two together. I think 200 and 100 could still be under this. So for my partial product for the first one, I'm going to use 300. 300 times 16 is going to be the sum of these two numbers, the answer to adding up these two numbers. So 3,200 plus 1,600 is 4,800. I probably still could have gotten closer, but I don't want to spend all my time, if I'm not 100% certain thinking of this. I'm going to go straight to my division. So now that I've done 300 times 16 to get 4,800, I'm going to subtract. 17 minus 8 is 9. 5 minus 4 is 1. 1,945. If I come to my chart, I could use 100. And as I look at this, 120, I could put those two together and still be less than this number. So I'm going to use 120 for my next partial quotient. 120 times 16 is going to be 1,600 plus 320, which would be 1,920. and I subtract, and I get 25. 32 is too big, so that tells me that I can only get one more group of 16 from 25. So my partial quotient is going to be 1. 1 times 16 is 16. If I subtract 25 minus 16 is 9. And then I'm going to have a remainder of 9. If I add these up, 300 plus 120 is 420, 421, remainder 9. Now on these next problems, if you'd like, you can see the problem, pause the video, work the problem, watch me work the video, and see if you end up with the same answer. So I'm going to get a big eraser on this one. And for these next ones, I'm not going to do as much talking about my thinking. I'm just going to mostly work the problems. So our next problem, we're going to start the single digit divisor, is 2,263 divided by 4. Fill in my chart. Okay, 4,000 is too big. So I add my 200. Times 4 is 800. As I look at this problem, I'm thinking 22 minus 8. If 12 minus 8 is 4, 22 minus 8 would be 14. And I can use this one again. (14 minus 8 is 6. Can't use 200 for my partial product anymore. So I'm going to go to, well, I'm going to use 150 added together, which is going to be 600. And I come to my chart, I'll use 10. 10 times 4 is 40. Then I add up my partial quotients: 200, 400, 550, 560, 565. Remainder 3. 565, remainder 3. The kids are almost in for recess, so I'm going to try and squeeze in 2 more problems. (5,565) divided by 5. Filling in my chart, I'm going to multiply all those by 5. 5,500, 250, 150, and 25. Then I can come to my chart. On this one, we finally have a winner. We can use 1,000. So 1,000 times 5 is 5,000. And then we can use 100. 100 times 5 is 500. We could use 10. 10 times 5 is 50. And then we could, 25 is too big, but since it's a single digit number, we can think about that. How many groups of 5 could I get from 15? I could get 3. 3 times 5 is 15. So for this problem, it works out I do not have a remainder. If I add up my partial quotients, 100, 1100, 1110, 1113, so 1,113 with no remainder. And last problem. Last problem we're going to do is let's go with 4,015 divided by 15. I'm going to multiply all of those by 15. I'm going to add my 2 for this one. 2 times 15 is 30. 5 times 15, do my multiplying. 1 times 5 is 5 plus 2 is 7, 75. 10 times 15 is 150. 20 times 15 is going to be 300. 50 times 15 is going to be 750. 100 times 15, 1,500. 1,000 times 15, 15,000. That one's too big. And for this problem, I'm going to add my 200. So I'm going to add a 0 to my product of 20 times 15, which would be 3,000. So now I can go ahead and start working my problem. So my first partial product is going to be 200, and I'm going to 200 times 15 is 3,000, and I subtract 40 minus 30 is 10. So 1,015, this is too much, so I'm going to go to my 50. 50 times 15 is 750. I'm going fast because the kids are ready to come in. 11 minus 5 is 6. 9 minus 7 is 2. I have 265. This is too big, so I'm going to go to 150. And I'm going to put my 10 and my 15 together, or 10 and 5 together for 15. So 150 plus 75 is 225. And I subtract 0, 4, 40. I can use 2 for 30. 40 minus 30 is 10. 10 is less than 15, so I have a remainder of 10. If I add up my partial products, 200, 250, 265, 267, 267, remainder 10. I know I went through that last one pretty fast. Make sure if you have any questions, you let Mr. Brandt know.